This is the first of hopefully a two-part program. I think the program is entitled Menucha Nefesh in Marital and Family Life. And I want to thank Rabbi Feiner and my good friend Dr. David Steiner for helping arrange this program. So, we're going to explore today, this evening, the connection between Ava, love, and Menuchas Nefesh, and so I want to begin by telling you a story that I've told a number of times over. I think it's a very important story. I tell it frequently at Vorts, at Sheva Brachos. It's a story I heard from Naftali Yeager, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Shaya Ostrov, and he tells the story about his late father-in-law, Shlomo Feifeld. So in the last days of his life, there was when Rav Shlomo Zatzal was when his end was imminent, no one was permitted to come into the house or to see him. There was one person who insisted that he had to see the Rosh Yeshiva, even though he knew he was quite ill. And he said essentially that I had to see the Rosh Yeshiva because his marriage was about to end. And he was told, there's no way you can see him. But he was so insistent that the Rosh Yeshiva, on his bed, in his state, heard the request and recognized the voice and said, send him in. So he was told that he can go in, but only for a minute. So he went in, and he stayed for a minute, and he went out. And no one knew what happened. A few days later, the Rosh Yeshiva, the Tzal, was nifter. And approximately 10 years later, Rav Yeager met this person somewhere. And he said to him, the last time I saw you was 10 years ago. And you went in to see the Rosh Yeshiva. You were one of the last people to see the Rosh Yeshiva. And you were there for a minute. Was it helpful? He says, yeah, it was very helpful. In 1 minute, in 1 minute. So he said, what could he have told you in 1 minute that would have been so helpful? So he said, I went in, I told him that my marriage was about to end. And he said to me, state in Chumash, Hafta Re'echa Kamocha. Re'echa does not mean your neighbor. Re'echa means your wife. You have a mitzvah midiraisa to love your wife at every minute. I have nothing more to tell you. Go home and mekayim the mitzvah midiraisa. And that's, he said, I heard what the Rosh Yeshiva said. I went home. I was mekayim the mitzvah. And it was 10 years later, we're still married, Baruch Hashem. It's a wonderful story. but there's so much that needs to be developed. What is love? Is the love between a frum couple the same as a love between a couple that's not frum? Right? How is love shown? What kind of environment is ideal for love to grow in? Is the love between a husband and wife different than the love between parent and child, other relationships, friends? These are some of the questions that I want to explore. Some we'll explore in terms of thinking, and some we're actually going to do a little bit of exercises that may be helpful. So to begin with, I want to describe to you a mashal. I want to give you a mashal, which is a very important mashal, which we'll return to at the end of the presentation. The mashal is about a high wire. It's about two high wire artists. When I was a kid, we used to go to Madison Square Garden usually on Pesach to watch the circus. In the garden, there was always, my favorite act was always the high wire artists. And the high wire artists, there were always two standing on opposite sides of the high wire. And they would be standing still, not moving, and then the drums would roll, and then they start walking towards each other. I never understood how anybody could possibly stand still on the high wire. And I never understood how people could walk towards each other and not fall. Later in life, after working with many couples and being married, I began to understand what it was all about. The first thing is that nobody stands still on the high wire. The high wire really is a place for somebody to stay balanced. And staying balanced means that there are millions of micro movements at every moment to stay on the high wire. No one stands still. If I'm driving a car on a straightaway, I have my hand on the steering wheel. Maybe to the kid in the back seat, the hand looks straight and not moving. But we all know the hand's moving, ever so gently. So the first thing is that everybody needs to be balanced. And balanced is a dynamic phenomenon, always moving to stay still. And the second thing I realize is when the couple begins to move together towards each other, it's not so pashut that they're moving towards, because at any given moment, somebody is always more balanced than the other person. So that means that if I'm balanced at any given moment, and I see my partner isn't on the high wire, I have to say, bend your knees, straighten your shoulders. I have to somehow convey my balance to his or her balance. And I have to share what I know about that to enable them to regain their balance. Now, what does that mean? It means that in marriage, the nimshal is that in marriage, that love may be an emotional experience, but one of the necessary conditions is balance. People have to feel stable. People have to feel safe, have to feel secure. And that safety and security and balance is a necessary precondition for marriage, for love, for security. Later in the program, we're going to do a meditation. And the meditation I call centering, and where we're going to describe this balance, and we're going to teach you a little bit of how to develop it within yourself. Another aspect of marriage that we're going to learn about is that as two people grow together in a loving relationship, they become a part of each other. They become integrated into each other's lives, which is impossible for anyone to really understand unless they're part of that relationship. One of the stories that moved me very deeply when I first heard it, and I'll share it with you. I heard many years ago. I heard it in, I think, 1977, a long time ago. I heard it from the Rosh Yeshiva of Yitzchak Elchanan Zatzal, Yosef Ber Soloveitchik, when I went to a conference in Boston. And he was describing what happens when two people grow together. So he was describing how his late wife, Tanya, was very ill, and they were living in Boston. And that she was being taken care of by a nurse on the porch downstairs. And he described this, by the way, to an audience of maybe 1,000 people. I was there for a conference. I'll never forget it. And most of the people were not they had probably never had seen or heard from a person speak before. And he spoke very elegantly and eloquently, and very movingly. So he described how in the middle of the night, knowing his wife was sick, his wife of many years, he got up in the middle of the night with a certain fear that he had, that maybe things aren't right, maybe things are not, and he heard her crying in the night. And he described how he, with great fear and trepidation, he got up, got out of bed, and walked downstairs to the porch where she was with the nurse, and describes how it was very dark, and he walks in to the porch, and suddenly it's silent. And as he manages to open up a light on the side so it doesn't shine directly, he realized that he had forgotten that she had died just a few days earlier. And he used that very poignant and very painful moment to share how important it is for people to have each other in life and to care for each other. He wasn't describing it as a way of, he wasn't looking for anyone to feel for him. He was trying to convey the meaning of when two people build their lives together, how interconnected, interwoven their lives are. And we see this interconnectedness, this interwoven quality. We see it in many people. We particularly see it in Gedolim. I remember Rav Scheinberg, who used to visit Eretz Yisrael. He and his wife Bessie were married, I think 80 years. 80 years. And he claimed that they never had a fight. You see it in the homes. I remember my wife and I went to visit Rav Shlomo Zalman on Arbach. You feel the quality of the gentleness of home life in Jewish life. So, What is the secret? What is the element that enables people, great people, and people who are not great, people who are like the rest of us? What is that element that enables two people to develop a sense of closeness and a sense of love, a sense of emotional intimacy in which they can build a life together? So there was a sefer that I refer to very frequently. It's a sefer that I try to learn every Shabbos. It's called Das Torah. And it's the weekly shiurim of the Mashgiach from Mir, Rabbi Rucham Levavitz. This sefer was probably compiled in the 1930s. It was released just maybe about 30 years ago by his son, Simcha Zissel. And in this sefer, he describes, there's a mimer that he has called Sod of Olam Haba, Netze Matoi, Inyan HaMenucha. He talks about Menuchas and Nefesh. And we're going to talk about Menuchas and Nefesh this evening. And the connection between Menuchas and Nefesh and love and Ahava. And that element which is so central to Jewish life. Now, what's Menuchas and Nefesh? It's a long discussion. But for those of you who daven Mincha on Shabbos, the Anshe Knesset Gedola gave us 8 midus of Menuchas and Nefesh that we say in Mincha. And they are Ava, love, Nedava, giving, Emes, Ve'emunah, Shalom, Shalva, Hashke, Ve'vetach. 8 different qualities of Menuchas and Nefesh. So Rabbi Rucham says, without going in great length, but he says like this. He says, Menucha avo nedava. Hine avo habrios yotzeit mimalas hamenucha. That when a person feels Menuchas and Nefesh, a person has the ability to love the Bria, to love another person. Nedava motzei menucha. Nedava, the ability to give, comes from Menucha. Beli Menucha iyavshar liyos avo habrios. Without Menucha, it's impossible to love the Bria, to love anybody. Beli Menucha iyavshar liyos nedava b'shum ofen. Me'i Menucha yotzei sinas habriya. A person without Menucha is filled with sinna, with hatred. It's quite an alarming statement. But what he means, I think he means, is that Menucha means that a person feels a sense of inner balance. A person feels a sense of stability and security deep within himself or herself. Menucha is that Hashem gives me many different qualities, many different strengths. And these strengths of nefesh, my ability to see, my ability to speak, my ability to think, to walk and to talk, all of my human capacities are nefesh. When they're not coordinated, they all act in a chaotic way. And it can be a very frightening experience. It's a very insecure experience. And in my insecurity, I can't care about anybody else. But when I'm able to coordinate all of them, when I'm able to bring them all together, in a sense of, in a cohesive way, the way a an orchestra leader uses his baton to create a symphony of music, of harmony between 70, 80, 100 different members of an orchestra. It creates a thing of beauty. Menuchas HaNefesh means that I take all of those gifts that Hashem gives me, and I'm able to integrate, coordinate, harmonize, symphonize all of these elements, and through that I create a sense of security within myself. And from that security within myself, I'm able to love, I'm able to give, I'm able to feel shalom, bishalva, hashket, vevetach. I'm able to achieve the highest levels of human experience, which we recite Mincha on Shabbos, because Mincha is that time of Shabbos where we reach the height, the apogee, the culmination of Bo Shabbos, Bo Menucha. That's what Menucha is. So in a sense, if you walk into a house and you see a fish tank, and you put your hand in the fish tank and you say, boy, that water is warm. You say, well, yes, because there were tropical fish in that fish tank and they need warm water. In a sense, Menucha is the warm water in which people thrive. Menucha is that environment in which people feel a sense of deep security. But what happens in Menucha? What is the essence of the experience of Menucha? What does it create in us? So, we have those of us men who daven in the morning, when we put on our tefillin, we say Haneshama Shebamochi. What does that mean? That when we put on our tefillin, we remind ourselves that our tefillin are going on our head, on our foreheads. And on our forehead, Chazal tells us resides our neshama. That's a very strange thing, because we don't think neshama being any place. But it's not true. Chazal says there is neshama, and the neshama exists in our minds. Neshama sheba mochi. And so what is this neshama? Neshama sheba mochi. And how is it connected to Menuchas HaNefesh? And how is it connected to love? So the elder of Kelm asked the question. He said, when a baby smiles, he asked, why is a baby smiling? Why does a baby smile? So if I were to speak to psychologists, they would say a baby smiles because a baby is emulating the environment. A parent smiles, a baby smiles. A baby learns that a smile, that's the right response. The elder was not a psychologist, at least he wasn't certified, a psychologist. But he said a baby smiles because a baby reflects or expresses what its neshama is. There's no difference between an infant and the way it expresses itself and the neshama that exists within the infant. So he's saying that within each of us, there's a very deep and loving core, which is the neshama. Because that neshama is given life at every moment from the Ribono Shel Olam. And being given life at every moment from the Ribono Shel Olam, it is aware of Hashem's loving gift of life. And no matter who we are or what we're going through in life, there is at the core of who we are that neshama. We may not be aware of it. We may have been hurt. We may have been We may have gone through difficulties in life. We may be going through various pressures. We may be going through many things. We may not be aware, but nevertheless, each of us has a neshama that exists within us at every moment. A neshama shenasata bi taharihi. The neshama it exists at every moment. It was there before we were born. It exists with us throughout our lives. And it has an element of nitzchias. It continues to live on forever. It has been given to us in this world. It is tahor, it is loving, it is pure, and it's our neshama. So, what Menuchas HaNefesh does is it enables the neshama to begin to emerge from me'achrei apargod. A person who experiences the menucha of Shabbos is able to see and feel life differently. Why? Because the neshama is able to emerge. It's no longer behind the curtain. It's no longer hiding. It feels safe. So what Menuchas HaNefesh does in marriage is by creating that safe environment, by creating that experience of safety and security and warmth and caring, two people can feel that this is a place where my neshama can emerge. And as the neshama emerges, that's where love is experienced. And that's perhaps why Rabbi Rucham says, he says, once again, Hine ahava brios yotzei mimalas hamenucha. The love of the world, of life, emerges from the Maila of Menucha. Nedova motzeis menucha. Giving emerges from Menucha because I'm able to give. B'li Menucha iyavshar liyos avas abriya. B'li Menucha iyavshar liyos nedova. B'shum ofen mi Menucha yotzei sinas abriyas. So in every situation where people living close together and they're angry and they're hurt, it's because there is no Menucha. And the Shema isn't hiding. And that sensitivity that Hashem has given them, that the desire to show love and to receive love and to give love, suddenly is cut off. And when it's cut off between two people living together, it's a very painful situation. It's not like you have people in your office that you're angry at and you leave and you go home and you come back. There's a person you're living with. So far, are there any questions? Any thoughts, any questions before I continue? Okay. So one of the things I find very important is I can talk about Menucha for hours. But the question, what is it? What does it feel like? How do I get a deeper sense of how do I get a deeper sense of the experience? And not only that, but how do I take the experience and how do I bring it into my life? How do I bring it into my marriage? How do I bring it into my relationship with my children? Right? How do I create a different environment so that I can create a menuchadic environment? Which has a different feel, a different texture. So I want to talk about centering. Centering, and we'll talk about hands. Two hands. Two people on the high wire, they're balanced. They're centered. They've learned to take all of all the micro movements and to modify them to a degree that they are able to stay on the high wire. If you have a kid who's riding a bicycle the first time, his father may be holding the bike from behind, and he's going to do this. He's going to go to the left, he's going to go to the right, left and right. He's going to fall. But the more accustomed he gets to the movement of the bicycle, you're going to see that the movements become less jagged. And maybe after a few hours, you're going to see this kid riding on his bicycle with a big smile. He feels balanced. He's no longer doing this and doing that. His hands are on the handlebars, and he's sitting on top of the world. There's movements, but the movements are very slight and imperceptible. That's who he is. He is what we call centered. What does that got to do with hands? So hands, our fingers, our hands are the most delicate appendages of the body. We can play the violin with our hands. We can swing a tennis racket with our hands. We can write with our hands. We can conduct a symphony orchestra with our hands. We can't do that with our feet, our elbows, only with our hands and our fingers. Why is that important? Because each of us has a neshama inside. And we need a way to remind ourselves of how delicate the neshama is. I can tell you the neshama is delicate, but what does that mean if I say it? But if I give you a way of touching in a very gentle way, so then you can say, oh, just like this is gentle touching, so then I realize I have a gentle neshama within myself. The hands become a way of balancing myself. So not only do I recognize that I have a neshama and that I need love, but I recognize that you have a neshama as well and that you need love. And the more we learn to use our hands in this way, the more we see that we can achieve a sense of menuchas hanefesh in those situations and with those people who are most important to us. So I want to share with you a meditation. We can do a meditation here. And it's a centering meditation, and I call it, in a sense, soul-centered, if you want to give it a name. And what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you in a few moments, you're going to close your eyes, you're going to put down your pens, you're going to... And I'm going to take you through a visual journey while you're using your hands in a certain way. And I'll describe how you're going to use your hands. And then we're going to come out of the journey, and then we're going to talk about what it was like. And then we're going to talk about how one uses this in their everyday life. So there are three things I want to ask you to do with your hands. And I'll tell you as we do the exercise, you'll follow, and I'll be clear about what I'm asking you to do. The first thing we're gonna start. We're not going to do it at this moment, but I'm going to ask you to place your hands on your lap, and I'm going to ask you to put your 10 fingers together this way, right? Just touching your pads of your fingers. And then after that, I'm going to ask you to cup your hands. And you're going to cup your hands one inside the other, like you're holding maybe a Kiddush cup, a Havdalah cup, with one hand under the other. And then I'm going to ask you to gently stroke your hands. And then you're just going to touch your hands gently. You're going to touch on top, touch on the bottom. You're going to, any way you wish. That'll kind of be a free movement. Okay? Any questions before we begin? Okay. So let's begin. I'm going to ask you to place your hands on your lap. And I want to ask you to make sure my cell phone's off. Always important. Good. Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and place your hands gently on your lap and permit your fingers to touch each other ever so delicately. And the delicate touch of your fingers is so sensitive that you're not too sure when your fingers are touching and when they're untouching. And perhaps if I were to take a tissue and place the tissue between your fingertips, that tissue may very well float gently to the ground. And as you sense the touching and untouching of your fingertips, I want you to be aware that there's a part of you, a part of yourself, that feels the touching and untouching, and yet is also a part of, removed from, distant from the touching, observing, almost perhaps from the back of your mind. Because as you feel the gentle touching and untouching, you become aware that there's a part of you that is a part of the rest of you, a part that lives forever, that has always been here and will continue to be here. And not only is that part of you aware of your touching and untouching of your fingertips, but is also aware of the gentle rhythm of your breathing. And perhaps we can say that that part of you that is aware is your neshama. And your neshama is also aware that it receives life at every moment. The loving gift of life from the Rabboni Shlolem. And it's aware that at this very moment the Rabboni Shlolem is observing your neshama, that's observing the touching and untouching of your fingertips and the gentle rhythm of your breathing. Because in this gentle touching and untouching, you become aware of the delicate gift of life within you. And how delicate should this be? I'd like you to imagine that as you now cup your hands together, I'd like you to imagine that you're holding a child in your arms, an infant. And as you delicately rock this infant in your arms, and you feel a love for this infant, the infant is gently closing its eyes and falling off to sleep. Because this infant trusts you and trusts the feeling of safety that it experiences in your arms. And as you love this child, and as the child falls off to sleep, that delicate awareness is how delicate the neshama really is. Or perhaps it's early morning on a meadow as the sun begins to rise and the dew begins to settle on verdant grass, and one flower opens its petals to receive the dew as it descends with its life-giving moisture. And as the flower rises to receive the dew and the dew descends, at that moment of their touching, that's how delicate the neshama is. Or perhaps it's noon in the midday sun in a beautifully manicured garden. And the garden is filled with wondrous aromas and colors and the movement of life. In the middle of the garden, there's a pond. And the pond is filled with warm, crystal, pure waters. And sitting on the pond is a pure white lily pad. And the sun shines its warm, loving rays onto the lily pad as it sits so quietly and gently on the waters. And I'd like you to imagine that you can touch the waters with your pinky and you feel how warm the waters are. And there are steps going into the pond, and you can step into the pond and feel the warmth of the waters. And as you feel the warmth of the waters, you can feel the warmth of the sun. And you can actually feel yourself floating in the pond. And you realize that as you're floating in the warmth and loving rays of the pond and the sun above you, your neshama floats within you. It floats within you, and yet it fills your entire being, giving life to your whole being. And now you can leave the pond, you can walk out of the pond, and you see a tree, perhaps an apple tree. And under the tree you can sit, and you can smell the aromas of the blossoms and feel the breeze around you. And there are footsteps coming towards you as you sit under the tree. And the footsteps are recognizable. They're the footsteps of the person with whom you share your life. And I'd like you to imagine that this person with whom you share your life, your zivig, your soul partner, your life partner, sits down under the tree next to you, and you look into his or her eyes, and you realize, or you can say, just as I have a neshama, so too do you have a neshama. And just as Hashem loves me, Hashem loves you. And just as I need to feel safe and secure, so do you need to feel safe and secure. And you realize that this is the essence of love, the safety and security that emerges from your neshama and from Menuchas Nefesh. So with that, I'd like you to imagine that you can now get up from underneath the shade of this tree, and you can leave the garden. And as you leave the garden, you realize that all the while you were the parent, but you were also the child. And you were the dew, but you were also the flower. And you were the lily pond, but you were also the lily pad, but you were also the pond. We give love, we receive love. And that's the nature of who we are, each of us inside. That's the neshama within us. And as your hands are touching, perhaps touching each other in a gentle stroking way, or perhaps being cupped or touching your fingertips, you realize that just the touch of your fingers or your hands reminds you of the gentle neshama in each of us. And just the gentle touch enables us to be aware of that deep, delicate source of life that Hashem gives us at every moment. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes or you can keep them closed for as long as you wish. So, this is the meditation which I call centering. And it one way to effectively use this is anyone that you want to speak to. It could be your spouse, it could be your child, it could be your friend, it could be a parent. All you do is permit your hands to touch in a very gentle way. And you will find that as your hands touch, you feel that you're centered. You'll feel like the kid on the bicycle, because he's not going to the left and he's not going to the right. He is balanced and he's on that. He's sitting on the king of the hill. You'll find that you can say things in a much gentler way. You'll find that the tone of your voice changes. We say, Kamayim aponim l'ponim kach lev ha'adam, Mishlei. When you're centered, you will enable the other person to be centered as well, even without their knowing it. When you're centered, you're providing. Go back to the high wire now. Imagine what happens on that high wire. Because at every given moment in our lives, there are always two people on the high wire. One is always more balanced than the other. So what being balanced means is being centered. Means, and that's the essence of Menuchas HaNefesh, because I'm taking all of these kochos and I'm able to create a symphony of movement. And if I'm balanced and I'm centered, I can say things in a certain way, and I'm not going to be pulled into places I don't want to go to. And I can be reassuring, and I can be caring, and I can be everything I want to be, to provide what I want to give to my spouse, to my children, my friends, parents. I can find a way of expressing my own neshama and find a way of enabling their neshama to emerge as well. So that's the nature of the experience of the high wire, and of being centered. So I think this is maybe a good place to stop my presentation, and if anyone has any questions, so I'd like to respond.
How do you get into that centered place when you're in a place where you can't kind of go into that mindset?
Well, there are two aspects to it. One is you want to be able to listen to the meditation, and for those of you who are interested, we will make an audio available to you. And although perhaps we can cut out the meditation itself so you can just listen to it. And it's a good thing to listen to it. You should try to listen to it at least once a day for a couple of weeks, because you're cultivating an experience that is not a part of your life. Now that you need, however long it took me 11, 12 minutes. But you'll find that when you use centering in the here and now, when you walk into your office, when you walk into your home, you don't need the meditation. The meditation deepens the experience. But all you need now is the touching of the hands. And the touching of the hands not only reminds you of the delicateness of your neshama, but also it enables you to stay balanced. So everything you say and the way you say it and the words you use, the force behind them is going to be modified by that awareness of what a wonderful thing it is to feel like you're on that bicycle, holding those handlebars with such a sense of pride and triumph that you're balanced. You'll always find that you're not going to be pulled into any kind of dissonance, discord, conflict, because you're the one who's going to stop it, because you're balanced, you're not going to be pulled into it. So there are two elements. One is deepening or cultivating the experience, and the other that you listen to, and the other is the experience of just the sensory experience of having your hands touch. And they can touch any way you want. They can be cupped, right, as we did. They can have the fingertips touching, or you can be gently touching any part, stroking. But they all have the same effect. So you should know that what it is, they actually have a different effect. Because if the fingertips are touching, you'll find that gives you a sense of stability and balance. If they're cupped, you'll find that it gives you the ability to be more expressive expressive in a gentle, loving way. And if they're just kind of touching each other, it can be more soothing. So they have different qualities that you can bring out. All of these things they're means to which we can enable ourselves to feel that sense of menuchas nefesh, and to permit ourselves to be aware of that haneshama shebamochi, the delicate neshama within ourselves, which then becomes the basis for the emergence of ahava between two people. And it's not an ahava that we see, that we, in Western concept of ahava. It's an ahava that enables two people to build their lives together, to create this warm tropical fishbowl, right? It's a warmth, it's an acceptance, it's a support, a security that where we thrive as Yidden. Yes?
It seems that from what you're describing, one could do this without reciprocity.
Well, yes and no. If we do it yourself, you'll notice that it does create a change. Eventually, what you want to do is you want to share it with your partner. There's a book that I've written that's outside, or you can have him listen to this, him or her listen to this, the audio. So you really want to share the experience. But you'll find that even without it, it makes an appreciable difference in the give and the take of life.
I'm saying if the other party is agitated,
Well,
one can still do this.
But you'll find that the agitation does not spin out of control.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly a vital importance. You do want to take it to the next level where you want to. But that in itself is important, because you're able to keep you're able to maintain the balance within the relationship because conflicts only occur when both people lose their balance. When they're on the high wire and they both feel insecure and then they hit each other with the poles. That's what conflicts are. But if one person is balanced and secure.
But if one is on the high wire and one is falling, it's going to impact the person who.
Well, the high wire is not really a good example in that sense. We're never falling, we're not on the high wire in that sense. We're interacting. We don't fall. We take our cues from each other. We kind of quiet down. We learn to walk away. We learn to diffuse things. The high wire is the metaphor works up to a point. It doesn't work after that. Good. Any other questions, concept, thoughts? Yeah.
Just to follow up, it seems that you're hoping that the other person takes the cue from your menuchas nefesh.
Well,
because your response is different, but what if they don't? In other words,
well, they always will in that sense, in the sense that you're not going to things will not spiral out of control. That in itself is a value in of itself. It doesn't have to go any further than that. And if you can share it with the other person, and they become a partner in this, so that even more so, yeah.
Just add to Robert's this way. Having gone through some of this training with Shaya, because I found this amazing at one point, it takes two to tango. It's very hard to have an argument with one person. And I actually went through one real life example where I had a difficult situation in my office, and we discussed this sort of thing, and I almost didn't believe it. And I literally went into a situation girded with steel that I was not going to argue with this given person who would bait me, seemingly arguing. And after, what did I say, about a minute and a half, this person got very exasperated and said, "You're just not going to get upset, are you? You're just going to really be calm, aren't you?" Well, then I have no choice but to be calm. What are you doing? It was very unsettling for them. And it takes heroic ability to do this for one person. But the idea that one person can make a difference, all I can tell you is try it. You'll be shocked about how a dynamic of two people requires two people. One person on their own is just not going to enjoy it if you're not. There's no pleasure in arguing with no one. There's no, and as upset as somebody is, nothing but a warm plate and a smile and a deep sincerity of wanting to not argue. It's not just wanting to argue, it's not arguing. It's actually embracing a concept of Menucha. And again, the only way is through practicing the centering so that you yourself are in a position of being strong.
Thank you.
Not that I do this, but it's wonderful when I can.
Very good. Okay. So I think with that, I think it's perhaps a good time now to stop.